We're going to continue now with Bible 101. This will be Bible 101-4 when you see the title. And as usual, it will be put in the seminary folder. Now, what we have been doing so far, we are already up to, we're in the New Testament and we are coming to the Gospels. Now, once we get to the Gospels, we will find out exactly where we left off. And this will give us a good idea of the kind of things we're looking for, because this section here does have specifically just what's in the New Testament, so we'll get into a little more detail here. So I will continue reading from this large segment that you can see there. So we're getting into the New Testament and going into the Gospels and the book of Acts. Now, first of all, there are 4 Gospels. 3 are synoptic Gospels, that is to say, SYN equals same or parallel, Greek optic view. So these have a parallel view and tell in general outline of the same flow of events of the life and teachings of Jesus Christ and his disciples. Now, synoptic Gospels are Matthew, Mark, and Luke. That is to say, those do have in general the same view in general and the same basic outline. Like if you take a harmony of the Gospels, you will find in those 3 Gospels, the synoptic, they are very close to one another, very parallel. But when you come to the Gospel of John, which is the last of the 4 Gospels, it is different from the synoptic. It is more, I would say, to use the word Gnostic, Gnostic, and has much more emotional tone. Actually, we'll get more into detail later, but the Gospel of John does have events in the life of Jesus, but actually it goes into his mind much more thoroughly than the others do. That's all I'll say about it right now. Now, then the book of Acts was written, as I say, before the same person who wrote the book of Luke. It was written together with Acts, but is printed in the Bible with Luke among the Gospels and Acts right after the last Gospel, John. So they're in a different order in which they were actually written when you get into the Gospel. Now, among all the Gospels that were written, Mark was the first Gospel written, but printed in the Bible after Matthew. So you can see the chronology of the Gospels is different than the order we have in the New Testament right now. So now we'll go into the 4 Gospels one at a time. And again, I'm going to watch my time limit here because it appears that for some reason or other, I can only go on about, say, 7 or so minutes. So first of all, let's go into the Gospel of Matthew. Now, what is about the Gospel of Matthew as the first Gospel, as you know? It is the most Jewish Gospel and contains more of the parables of Jesus than any other. It is the most esoteric or hidden gospel in that the meanings are deep and ask much of the initiates. Gurdjieff, for example, says that this has the secrets of Christianity, he says about the Gospel of Matthew. Here, Jesus shows his continuity with the Old Testament and his transformation of the Old Testament. Now, in the Gospel of Mark, this is the earliest Gospel and has eyewitness accounts. So you see, that's very important if it has eyewitness accounts. So Luke was written for the Greek and tried to be historically accurate. Its emphasis on female aspects of God in the role of the Virgin Mary, and also presents the Holy Spirit in the life of Jesus. This record continues in the book of Acts, as I said before. Now, when we get to the Gospel of, let's see, that was Luke, Mark, okay, and then the next one is the Gospel of John, which I've mentioned before, but I'll mention this here. This Gospel does not attempt history, but about the inner life of Jesus and the emotional power of his relationship with God and his projection of love into the lives of the disciples and the new covenant. It has great depth of meaning. And then you get to the book of Acts. This says the book of Acts continues where Luke leaves off and shows the power of the Holy Spirit to enable the disciples to continue the message and healing of Jesus in and beyond Israel into other regions. So you see, that is a summary of what we have first in the New Testament, the four Gospels and then the book of Acts. And of course, the book of Acts follows the book of John. Then you get into what is next called epistles. That word actually means letters. Now, some of these epistles, as you probably know, were written by Paul, or what is often called the Apostle Paul, or even Saint Paul. And epistles or letters, they can put it either way. Now, we will read you a little about that. And it says here, there are 14 letters attributed to Paul, and he was a Jewish intellectual originally, named Saul. He was a persecutor of the early Christianity until the Spirit of Christ literally knocked him off his horse and blinded him. After this inner experience, he became a missionary for Christianity all over the Middle Eastern world. There are letters to the churches he visited, and some were from where he was in prison for his efforts. These letters are difficult reading, yet with many powerful teachings and beautiful passages, but also show the trouble Paul had integrating the radical experience of Jesus into his life. Now, we won't go any further with this, but we'll continue with what these are called epistles and letters in our next section.